Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I'm Julia Stanford, and I am the Programs and Operations Manager for Texas Lines of Groundwater Districts, TAG. Just a quick reminder that we work hard all year long to bring our members valuable trainings like this, like the Texas Groundwater Summit in August, speaker series at our business meetings, the cybersecurity training video, GCD boot camps, and of course, occasional webinars like this. Leah is unable to join us today. She had an in-person meeting, but I'll be emceeing today, introducing our speaker. Before we get to that, I'd like to briefly just go over a few technical housekeeping items. I think all of you have probably done enough of these webinars that you remember, but the webinar format that we're on here does not allow for audience cameras in order to keep the focus on the speaker. You also can't turn on your microphone, but we may have an opportunity at the end in case you need to engage in a dialogue with the speaker. We'll have more on that in just a minute. If you do have any questions during this presentation, you can type them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And questions submitted here will go directly to me, and I'll verbalize those questions as appropriate. Tim has graciously told me that I can interrupt him if I need to, but otherwise we'll plan to hold questions till the end. Keep in mind that this questions feature is not a chat function, so there's not the ability to talk among participants. But since they go to me, it is also a good place if you're having any technical issues or need me to troubleshoot anything, go ahead and type it in there. And let's see, if you do have a more detailed question and you need to, it's a lot of sentences that you need to engage in a dialogue with the speaker, then you can use the little hand raise function, and I'll keep an eye on that and call on you, and that will allow me to unmute you. And that's for kind of the more casual questions towards the end. We will be recording this and sending it out to everybody with a copy of the presentation slides. I'm going to try to get it out in the weekly updates tomorrow, but if not then it would definitely be early next week. And I think that's all of the housekeeping items. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. We're excited to partner with a new organization to us that several of you probably know. But Timm Johnson is the Member Services Manager for the Texas Water Conservation Association, also known as TWCA, a membership organization very similar to TAG, with just a different membership profile. The TWCA Risk Management Fund. Tim has been gracious enough to work with us to offer a primer today on what the Risk Management Fund is, what it can offer its members. And it's our hope that you'll all get something out of this, whether you are already a member of the fund and just want to brush up on what the benefits are, or if you're curious what your district's insurance and risk pool options could be. With that, I will let Tim take over now, and I'll just chime in with any questions. Thank you so much for being here, Tim.
Well, thank you, Julia. I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with your members, and as I know some of the Risk Management Fund members are likely out there as well. So greetings to all of you. I hope you are somewhere where it is warm and dry. I am in Central Texas, and we're getting the benefit of a rain shower that came off the coast of Mexico, and so we're able to hopefully recharge some of our aquifers and our water systems. Be able to see the results of that sometimes in 10,000 years. So, but I do, again, thank you for spending time with me today, spending time with Julia to understand a little bit about the Risk Management Fund. And let's talk about some of the things that get associated with that. So as Julia said, I'm Member Services Manager. I've been with the fund for just a little over 7 years. I started out as the training and development consultant and went around to a lot of districts and authorities that are currently members, and spent time with them providing information on leadership training and development. Then I was promoted to the position of Member Services Manager. Born and raised in South Texas, spent my life here. I will spend the remainder of my life. Groundwater is a tremendous concern of ours because we will be retiring on a 5th generation ranch around the Goliad, Texas area. And so that is our lifeblood. Very big on conservation and also using resources wisely as we live out our lives and are good stewards of the land and its resources. I've got about 25 years as a business consultant prior to this position here, where I would work with companies on improving everything from their bottom line to their employee engagement to they're taking a look at their risk management profile in ways that we can capitalize on the good things that come from risk. More on that in a moment. In my job, I kind of act as a liaison, a concierge, somebody that can guide members to where they need to be. Sometimes I'll have a member that'll call me and I can answer a question right away. Sometimes, I have to seek out the expertise of some of the fantastic people I work with. There is such a huge pool of knowledge and a lot of experience that we have. You will, though, see that there are times when you will call up and ask a simple question, or a member will call up and ask a simple question, and we will need to research that a bit because there may be some things that are just outside of the range of a insuring agreement or outside of the range of your policy that we'll need to discuss that potentially may have effect on all members. So we want to make sure that we're engaged with that and can get you the responses and the things that you need to continue on with your day and provide for your constituents. If you need to contact me, you'll see this a couple of times. My contact information is timm.johnson@sedgwick.com. That is where people typically will reach me unless they give me a call. And I only hand out my phone number to members unless you want to engage with me, and then we'll pick it up. I'll send that number to you and we'll start to talk. So today we have about an hour. If we don't need the full time, then we won't take the full time. I will allow you to get on with your day. But we're going to talk a little bit about what the fund is, what it's not, how we are perhaps different than some of the other insurance products that you can find yourself. Talk about the available fund services with leadership, risk control, and consulting, legal, and cyber. Talk about some common questions we get, and then at the end, we'll bring it all together and provide you some time to ask questions. I will tell you, if you have a question that's specific to your district or authority, that's probably going to be best served over the phone, where we can talk, on a one-to-one basis, because every situation is different. Even if it's a district that's right next to yours that has basically the same number of employees or management, you may have some things that are unique to your situation that we'll want to talk about interpersonally. So what is the fund? Well, how are we different? And the fund is a governmental self-insurance risk pool created through interlocal agreements with members. That's a lot of words. So we have an amount that we keep in our reserves to provide a level of insurance, perhaps up to $1 million for certain insurance products. But then we also seek out reinsurers that can provide a higher level of insurance. So let's say that the fund itself has a $100,000 policy. We will engage reinsurers to perhaps take that up to $5 million. Depends on where it needs to be. We can work with you on that. A very common question we have is how much insurance should we have? And we have advisors that can walk you through that. But this was created at a time in the 70s and 80s where we were in what's called a hard market, meaning that there weren't enough insurance companies to go around, and if the insurance was there, it was quite expensive. And so that happened in the 70s, and then again in the 80s. In the late 80s, we had come together with TWCA, and some of our founding members had worked to create a risk management fund where there could be self-insurance and to create a pool. From that point, we have gained 90 something members. And I say something because sometimes you'll have a management company that manages 2 or 3 districts or something like that. So we just, tap that out at about 90. As Julia had related to me, about 22 members are also associated with TAG. I will tell you that we are not a traditional insurance company. We do not operate like a Hartford or a Travelers or an Allstate. We don't operate the same way. We don't provide that direct insurance. We have that, like I said, that first level of self-insurance, and then we have reinsurance. So you'll see us operate a little bit differently than what that is. What we are is an insurance pool. And insurance pools were created because you had certain people who are, or businesses that were like-minded, had like products, had like services, and they could join together to perform a governmental, um, uh, become a governmental entity. And so each of you within your districts or authorities have that not-for-profit designation, but what you really are is a unit of local government or a quasi-governmental entity. We want to use those terms, and there's specific reasons why that I will address in a bit. So we're a self-insurance vehicle. We don't have policies of insurance. What you'll have is what we call coverage documents. So think of like the policy you get for your homeowners or your auto insurance. We have coverage documents. There's a little bit different language in there because we're a pool instead of an insurance company. And you might see those if you ever look at your coverage documents. We do purchase that reinsurance or sometimes excess insurance to protect fund members from large claims. There are times when you might have a long-standing relationship with the fund, and so you carry these coverages, but perhaps you have an event. Maybe you have an event that involves volunteers, and you say, hey, are we covered under this, or do we need to get some extra insurance or an additional policy to cover those things? Sometimes you will have a construction project and you need specific insurance for that, and you wonder, okay, can you look at this contract? Let's see where we're covered, and we will do those kinds of things with you. But the fund is member owned and member governed. So our board makeup is 11 members that somehow have the benefit of working with water in the state. So you have to be a member of TWCA, we have those member governed areas where we want to have somebody from irrigation. We want to have somebody from groundwater. We want a river authority. We want the different types of water entities to be represented. We want to make sure that people's voices are heard. And so we purposefully choose people from different areas in water in Texas to provide that type of leadership. We have workers' comp, we have liability, we have cyber and property. Those are our four main products for coverage, but we will also seek out different types of insurance. We have a company that we're associated with that has what we call specialty insurance. So you may need specific insurance for specific types of things. And so we also will seek out and find that for you. And lastly, we have a lot of value-added loss services, loss control services, and those are core to the fund, but we are a risk management company as well. And so we want to do what we can to avoid any incidents, and we can help with that in a number of different areas. So I'm going to talk about some insurance types and terms and just some basic things. Some of you may know this, you may be very well versed. Others may, appreciate just a little bit of clearing the air and discovering what these terms mean and how they might affect you. And in business, for a business to operate successfully, you have to accept a certain amount of risk. There is nothing that is really worthwhile or joyful unless there's some sort of risk involved, and we help you kind of measure and ameliorate that. Maybe transfer that risk to someone else, or do what we can to avoid these types of incidents that are sometimes necessary to operate the business. So the first insurance type that I'll talk about is anytime that you have a coverage document or you have a policy, something you want to consider, and this will be part of the handout, but you want to look at DICE. Okay, so DICE is basically your declarations, talking about what the policy, it states what your property or risk that you want to insure. It defines those terms, how many employees you might have. We'll ask things along the lines during an application of your most recent financial documents. We may ask for your policies that you're currently covered by. to take a look at that, because we want to look at the declarations that are part of that. The second part of that is the insuring agreement that defines some of the terms of that. You know, your payouts. What are your coverage limits? What are your deductibles? What is your incident rate? We'll look at those kinds of things to include those as part of the total document. C are the conditions. So those are the provisions inserted in the policy that qualify or place limitations on our promise to pay. So we want to make sure that those are well defined. We will cover this under these conditions. We will take a look at this and see we will cover part of this, maybe not all of it, but we want to make sure that those are clear to you. And lastly are exclusions. In any insurance policy, you will see some exclusions. We don't cover everything, but we want to make sure that we cover the most important things. So some common things in insurance have to do with like acts of God, war. There are some policies that exclude mold, flooding. It's dams are hard to cover. But we want to make sure that we have both the conditions that will be met and the exclusions, those things that are excluded. And sometimes you'll see that in your policy, and we can have a conversation about that if you have a specific set of circumstances. So workers' compensation, the state of Texas is a right to work state. And so workers' compensation for many businesses is not a requirement. However, if you are a government entity, it is. But this covers things for employees like medical care, lost wages. If someone, God forbid, ends up with a lasting condition or disability, there's some coverage under that. We have had death claims in water, and unfortunately, you know, those are tragic every time those happen, but we do have things set up to continue to support the family for minor children and also the surviving spouse if that's the case. Sometimes it will be parents, sometimes we will pay for funeral costs within that policy, and so that's not a great thing to talk about, but it is an important thing under your workers' compensation policy. Liability, lots of different liabilities. I could have at least an hour-long conversation that I would imagine no one would attend that has to talk just about liability, because there's a lot of different types of liability. But we talk about general liability. Basically, somebody comes on your property and gets injured. We can talk about your coverages under general liability, professional liability like negligence, misrepresentation, violation of good faith. A lot of our entities will want to have a conversation about directors and officials. Lots of directors and officials are really nervous right now because the court system is sometimes been labeled as getting a little bit out of hand. We'll enter some of the things like jury nullification and have some examples of that. So we want to have liability coverage within limits for you. Property, this is pretty much the most basic type. What we want you to do is list all the property that you want covered: automobiles, buildings, fences, flagpoles, equipment, pump stations, those types of things. We want to have all of those labeled because if something happens, we want to make sure that that is part of your coverage. If it's not on, if it's not on the schedule, it's likely we won't cover it. Things like parking lots, driveways, fountains, those are some types of things that people have neglected to cover that with the assistance of our team, we've been able to help identify and get those on the schedule. Auto physical damage likely will come under property as well. Within this, you know, but then you all will also, as part of your auto coverage, have a liability policy that, heaven forbid, somebody gets injured during an auto accident, that you're covered as well. A newer type of insurance, this has been around for a number of years, at least 5, where there's been some sort of cyber insurance. So cyber is becoming very, very difficult to find. Cyber insurance, what they have done over the years, even in the past 3 years, is they've lowered the amount that they would cover and then increased the amount that you would pay. And that's what's happening with cyber right now. There's usually something in the insurance market that's a little out of whack. For a while, it was workers' comp, and then it became property. Now cyber is taking that over. And so, but your cyber insurance will help cover things that have to do with financial losses you may incur in the event of a cyber attack or a data breach. We always want to talk about incident instead of breach, because breach is a more definitive word and has some legal consequences to that. So we talk about an incident until it's defined as a breach. But we have people on staff that can help with that. Plus, some costs for remediation, such as paying for the investigation, crisis communication to get out ahead of this. If perhaps you find that the hackers have gone in and secured some of your PHI, your personal health information, that's an extremely difficult thing, and so we might have to work with some of your clients or your customers to work within those cyber losses. We also, like I said, directors and officials is a big point of conversation that I'm having with a lot of applicants, because again, their directors, their board wants to make sure that if something happens and they are sued on a personal basis, that there is some coverage for them. That is something that we provide and something that we discuss and have an upfront conversation with you to take back to your board to ask them what their comfort level is versus the cost of that. There needs to be a balance. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you're familiar with takings or eminent domain in the state of Texas, those are very difficult cases that we run into if someone's property needs to be used for public good. There are laws in the state of Texas that say things like no person's property shall be taken, damaged, or destroyed for or applied procedures required to initiate eminent domain, without making sure that they're properly compensated. So those are some of the things that are just types and terms. If you hear me bring something out a little bit later, hopefully you can refer back to this, and then I can provide some additional information if that's helpful to you. So, like I said before, people, the risk associated with doing business is just something that needs to be managed. We could all just sit around and do nothing and have a failing business because we want to be totally secure and free from risk. A worthwhile life is not devoid of risk. We all assume a certain level of risk. What we do at the fund is help to make sure that you have the right level of coverage, and then also we want to have some risk management procedures that perhaps can prevent some of the incidents that you might see, some of the claims that you might experience. So we have a lot of fund services that we can be involved with. So let's talk about the first one. So this is leadership training. This is historically been something that's been really popular when we went through the experience with COVID and people staying at home. We were asked to stay at home by our company because we don't want to perhaps spread, and there wasn't a lot of information. We did not know then what we know now. So we switched over to cyber. Now we're back to doing on-site leadership training. This can directly impact your liability because we provide training for current and future leaders to help them improve their skills and perhaps avoid risky situations. Dan Hernandez, who is the head of our leadership training division, he and I worked together for years, putting things together, making them really focus on real life and applicable skill. We know that many times your leaders may not have ever had any formal education on how to lead other people. It's very likely that they were promoted because they're a good doer. But we know that good doers aren't always good leaders, and maybe somebody hasn't gotten any formal training on how to lead other people. In fact, they may be leading people on Monday that Friday they were working right next to. And so that's another difficult situation, but we're empathetic and realistic about those types of things. But we use a lot of different presentation methods, some hands-on things, some real-life examples, but it's relevant to new and existing managers and leaders. We can use your policies and procedures as part of this if you want to have a session that's a little bit more focused on HR, avoiding risk in those areas. If you have specific policies and procedures or forums, we can incorporate those to make the presentation a little more live. We can do this in concert with you if that's something that would help as well. But it looks at leadership from a legal and compliance perspective, to member-specific needs, such as cultural considerations. A big topic that we had, especially with some of the larger districts and authorities, is having all of their employees seek out and receive training on respect at work. So how to avoid harassing situations, how to avoid situations that may result in a discrimination claim. We get into some of the more harder topics on that, what are the laws, and then some soft skills for how to perhaps avoid those situations as well. These can be completed in a 4-hour session. We do have some online training available, and then we do have some districts or authorities that involve themselves either in a regional training or on site for a 2-day training. That's a pretty complete training that hits on a lot of different topics. So these are some of the topics that we have, and some people want to start out with one and go to another. Do you have to have this particular topic before you go to this one? And we say no. Each of these are standalone. They do tie together, but each of these are standalone. And so if you'd like to, if you're a current member or a future member and want to talk about availing yourself of some of these services, connect with me and we can do that. We also have a risk control, loss control division. This is not dissimilar from perhaps if you are using like TML IRP, they have a risk control division. We think ours is even more evolved and involved with you, but we can do site surveys, talk about your claims with you, your basic safety training, driver training. Maybe you have, this is a big topic that they're telling me that people are reaching out to them about now, is safety committees. Now, if you are a district or authority with one person, that may not be important to you, but even if you have a few people, a safety committee can help get the right mindset and have people follow the right steps to maintain a degree of safety. Site safety training, safety program design. We take a look at new construction. If you're having new construction, we're able to look at that with you. The contracts that you have associated with that, maybe some life safety codes are involved. We can look at those things with you and provide some guidance in those areas. Sometimes people say, hey, if we avail ourselves of you to come and do a consultation, do we have to do those things? Are we tied into that? Are our rates tied into that? That's not the case. We want to do some prevention within these. Now, if we find some things with you that perhaps need to be repaired because there's a high level of safety need, then we'll address that with you individually. We also have risk consulting, and we have a gentleman named Richard Wigzell that takes care of our risk consulting. I'm afraid if we ever lost Richard, we'd have to hire 3 or 4 people because he has such a breadth of knowledge about these kind of things. But he can look at employee injury and accidents, what we can do, if to avoid injury or damage to employees or members of the public, again with the construction, and then maximize your transferring of risk. He may look at the contract that you're putting together for a new project and say, we need to take another look at this, because what this does is allows your contractor to share the risk with you. And we want to be able to transfer as much of that risk as possible through hold harmless agreements or certain components of the contract. So it comes in from the very beginning of a project, may or may not involve people at that time, all the way through conclusion. It could be that you need an additional, maybe an insurance rider, or maybe you need some extra insurance for a project that is time limited. So it doesn't have to be for the life of the organization. It could just be for the life of the project. These things have to do with, losses related to vehicles, property insurance, or property and employees for financial loss from employment practices lawsuits, property loss, catastrophic damage to reputation is another one. We have people on staff or that we can pull into a situation if maybe there's a difficult decision you have to make that isn't very popular in your community, and you are experiencing some damage to reputation, that we might be able to pull in some others that can assist with that. And then, as I talked about before, contracts and agreements are something we can review. We also have legal consulting. So this is, as it says at the bottom, it's a specialized supplement. It's not a replacement for your local counsel, or if you have legal on retainer. This is meant for if you've got a question that you're not exactly sure about and maybe want to just seek out a quick opinion. We have contracted with Joel Geary and his partners, and Joel's got about 20 years of experience working with water. So he's seen a lot of different things that are specific to water, but also things that have to do with employees in other areas or other business. So he can take the totality of his experience and use that for your benefit. Sometimes people want to, just take a look at a policy and procedure for me, or maybe there's an employee issue. We had an employee that we were going to terminate this morning, and they came in and said, well, you can't terminate me because I'm going to file a discrimination lawsuit. Plus, I just got injured this morning out in the yard. I was walking and tripped over a rock, and so now I'm injured. So if you terminate my employment, then I'm going to file wrongful termination. I'm going to file a whistleblowing, retaliation. So some of these situations that start out really small can turn into something really big, and legal consultation can help you avoid some of those risks and to head that off. But it could be crisis management, responding to government requests, and there are ways to contact Joel. If you don't download the packet and want to just reach out to me, I'll be happy to connect you if you're a current member. If you're a future member, then we will also kind of talk you through what that involves. Next section is cyber consulting. Again, one of our most talked about policies. People are wondering, do I need it? Do I not? But we have a cyber consultant on staff, and his job is primarily working with all of our districts and authorities to have him come in and provide some on-site evaluation systems, of your systems, IT infrastructure. Maybe you have that you've hired another company to come in and do your IT because you don't have enough revenue for a staff person, nor enough business for a staff person. So you hire this out. What Lee Kane on our staff, who's got tons of experience in this area, can come in and take a look at your processes, systems, your policies and procedures. Are you missing policies and procedures that could be beneficial, such as, do you have a disaster recovery plan? Do you have an emergency response plan? What do you do if if you find that someone has tampered with your system? These are things that he can talk over with you before this types of things happen. He can give you a detailed report. It's a multi-page report with a plan of action that will help you focus on identified issues. We can also offer training to members. Doesn't matter how much hardware, how much software, how much infrastructure that you put into something. Hackers are always looking for ways in. Hackers love public entities, and because there's a lot of public health information stored by a lot of public entities, and so they target them. You may picture a hacker as someone that is sitting in their basement and doing hacking from there at maybe their parents' home or something like that. That's more the stereotypical way people will look at that. Really, what's happening in Europe, it used to be more of Ukraine, Russia, some of the Slavic countries, where they will actually have office buildings that hackers go to. They pack their lunch in the morning, they kiss their spouse, they take their kids to school, then they go to this office building, work from 9 to 5. They have benefits, they have paid time off, everything like you would have in a normal business. And so they're pretty sophisticated with this, to the point where if you buy a list of credit cards off the dark web, and a certain percent, let's say 20% of them are invalid or no good, they'll give you another list for free. So they're even doing customer service, and this is pretty detailed. And as a administrator, in my previous life, I will tell you, it's not what I don't know, it's what I don't know that I don't know that keeps me up at night. So this is an area that you can access as part of that. So those are the systems, those are the people that we have involved with the risk management fund. We're always on the lookout for different ways that we can serve our members, that would serve a large group of our members, and be able to uh, design our coverage products to meet those needs, and like I say, even anticipate some of those needs. So we do have some pretty common questions that people ask out front or up front, like, how are you different from the commercial market? I can tell you that you can certainly go out and get an insurance quote for workers' comp, for liability, and for property from somebody in your towns, or someone you know, and you can get covered through them. The way that we're different is, like I said, again, we're a pool, we're not an insurance company, but we are just involved with water. This pool is only water. You have like TML IRP, fine company, great company. I know some of the people that work there. They're targeted more for municipalities. That's more where their concentration is. You may have a Texas Mutual. Well, all they do is workers' comp. That's all they do. But the advantage that we have is that we know water, we work with water, we have some idea of the types of things that you experience on a daily basis, so we can tailor our conversations and our coverage to your needs. Oh, one more thing about the commercial market, and that is it's unlikely that they will have a robust risk management component of their coverage. They, by law, if you have workers' comp, they have to provide training that seeks to reduce injury for employees. But outside of that, there's really not a lot. TML IRP has some information that is related to mostly physical risk. They do have some for human resources, but again, it's not as robust. And I think they are now adding a cyber component of their coverage. TML is. I'm not 100% on that, but I thought I saw that on their website last week. Can I get a quote for just workers' comp or just liability or just property? Unfortunately, no. There are very certain cases, usually those that have been grandfathered in. So maybe 30 years ago they had all this coverage, but somebody comes to the fund and says, "Hey, look, I'm getting beat up by my board because one of the board members sells insurance. They really want to provide our workers' comp. They keep telling me, hey, why don't you keep the money in the local community? Why are you sending it to these people in Austin? You need to work." And so we understand some of the pressures politically there as well. We're just not set up to provide one type of coverage or the other. It typically needs to be all three. We can discuss anything outside of that. Sometimes people will say, "Hey, Tim, I've got a couple of applications right now of just single person districts that say I'm the only employee. We've got a leased car, but it's 10 years old. We have a computer that I brought from my home. So we really don't need a bunch of coverage." Well, we have some minimums that we have to meet as well to be able to meet the needs of the pool overall, and then also be able to pay for some of the administration. Even though our administrative costs are about 2%, which is way below the industry standard, there's some costs that are involved regardless of the size of the entity. Sometimes people say, "I see Sedgwick on your email. What is Sedgwick?" Well, when the fund started, it was called JI. At the time, it was a business started by a small group of very intelligent people with a lot of connections, and JI did really well. It came to a point where some of the people were looking to, get out of the company, to leave the company, and an offer came on the table by a company called York. York purchased JI, and now the company has been purchased from Sedgwick. What I will tell you is those are the people that write checks for us, that do our HR. They do some of our IT support. They provide a national window of what is happening, with other pools. But that is not who employs us. I mean, we're employed by the pool, by TWCA RMF. That is who we are. It's just that Sedgwick writes our checks. They really don't have a lot of involvement with the fund, other than support and guidance. That's about it. So you may not see that on other documents. You will see that in my email. What is the process to get a quote? Again, this is something that we have set up. If you are actively seeking a quote, you want to become involved, great. The reason why I say actively seeking is because it does take some work on your part. We need documents, we need property schedules, we need your audited annual reports. We need information related to your previous coverage policy. So there's just a list of things that we will need to go through the application process, and it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time, but it does take time. So there's skin in the game on both. We have to have that information to be able to proceed, and you have to be willing to provide that information. And then we have to look at a reasonable time frame in which you can get us that information. We cannot get the quote without all the information that we need. It's like somebody calling, coming up to you and say, hey, can you tell me how far down I need to dig my well? Well, you're going to have a lot of questions because it's not a one-to-one thing. What kind of output would I need to be able to fill my swimming pool? I don't know. I don't know what kind of swimming pool you have. I don't know what you currently have in place. So it's no different than you. We would need to find some of these answers out through the process with you. So let's kind of bring it all together. As the fund, TWCA Risk Management Fund, we are focused on providing the proper coverage for you and helping you manage your risk. Two things that impact the price of your coverage. One is your incident rate. How many incidents have you had that have resulted in a claim? And then the second is deductible. Where do you want your deductible be? We have some standard levels, but if you want to, just like your homeowner's insurance or your auto insurance, you raise your deductible, your rate typically goes a little bit lower. You get to a point where they just about get even, where it doesn't benefit you, but we can talk about that. We're different from the other commercial market, TML, IRP, and Texas Mutual, because we provide more robust services, and we have just this audience of water in this pool that we work with. We talked about the available fund services to help you predict, prepare for, and manage your risk. And we talked about some common questions here going forward, and then what I want to make sure is if we have any other questions, then let's go ahead and address those.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was very informative. We do have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to point out, I love that you, at one point you just said that it's only water in the pool, which is like just a perfect little secret water pun. You probably say the word pool enough that it doesn't sound weird to you, but I heard that.
I'll jot it down.
So, you talked about all the different ways that the pool is different from commercial insurance. So I'd just like to ask, how does that typically compare to the traditional insurance rates that our members, that folks might already be paying? And then any insight on the fluctuations in cost, any comment on the predictability and how members would budget for any unexpected fluctuations? How's that managed?
Yeah, let me address the first one, and that is you were talking about the difference between other insurance and the rates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I can tell you, I'll have people say, can you give me a quote over the phone? No, it takes much more involvement than that. because of the levels of insurance and how robust and the requirements of our reinsurers. Remember, above that level that we provide. Uh, so I can't ever tell you that we are the lowest rates. I don't know. We just signed up a new member a couple of weeks ago, and he said that it's equivalent to the prices that he's currently paying, but our coverage is much more robust. And this is somebody that probably won't avail themselves of maybe one or two of the additional risk management services, but they said, it's comparable. And once they took it to their board, the board was like, no, do it. Let's make the shift. So I will tell you, Julie, that I will never say that we are the lowest, because I don't know. I don't know. What we do is we work hard every day to provide the best coverage at the best rates we can. If you're a member of the pool and you're participating and you have a good claims experience record, it's very likely that we'll use of some of our reserves that or profit for the year to pour back into the fund and lower rates for people. That's really what we do. And then the second question had to do with,
Yes, any fluctuation in the rates, like how would that change from year to year, and how, and if there is, some level of fluctuation, how do your entities typically allow for that in their budget?
yeah, lots of conversation about that all the time. What we'll have a lot of members do is just automatically, like their CFO says, we're going to just put 10% in here for an across the board increase for insurance, because we've had some claims, and they can kind of predict that based on the cost of these claims, how far they've gone, the number of claims that they might have experienced. So you can kind of self-adjust a little bit with that. But those monies are escrowed for the future. The property market right now is just insane. So when you look at the news and see a tragedy that happens overseas, Maui with the wildfires, the most recent weather event, a hurricane in Acapulco, went from tropical storm to level 5 really quick. How does that impact Texas? Because it's a global market. It's a global, if there are tragedies that happen across the globe, not just in Texas, not just in Collin County, or wherever a person may be, it has to do with the global market. So one thing that we're currently seeing and predicting is that property rates will go up, maybe not as steeply as last year, but we don't know 100%. We just have indications from talking to other insurers. And the other is cyber. Cyber right now, based on, we're talking 6 months timeframes with cyber. 6 months ago, it looked like we were going to get very little coverage for a much higher rate. We were able to negotiate that this year, and it looks like it may not be as hard a hit next year, but we try to give our members through our board as much information as possible about what we can predict with this.
Great, thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no one likes to be blindsided, so that's good to know. And of course, that member governance, I think, probably has a lot to do with that too. It's,
You bet.
it's not a company, it's people just like you. Oh, and I did just want to ask real quick. You had mentioned in a previous conversation we had, it was Southeast Texas GCD that recently joined. So I do just want to mention that to anyone on this webinar. If you're looking to get a quote and learn a little bit more about that process, maybe from the GCD side, give John Martin a call, see how he went through that. I'm sure he'd love to share his experience. And then another question we have is if you could share any specific experience you've had with groundwater conservation districts. Are there any, if you have any examples of the types of the services that those participating GCDs have used?
Yeah.
The strongest selling point for a GCD, I guess.
Okay. All right. First off, I've never worked for a GCD. I never claimed to work for a GCD. I've never stood in your shoes. Okay. I want to get that right out. I have not done that. But typically the GCDs we work for are pretty small, and maybe 4 employees, it may be 1 employee, so their claims experience most times is really small. But one thing that we had to do with some of those members, even if they just got a few employees, is to point out the fact that if you have a claim, or pardon me, if you have an injury, file a claim. It could just be an incident, and it doesn't affect your insurance at all if it's just an incident. If this person didn't seek medical care, if they didn't seek outside medical intervention, we just mark it down as an incident just in case something happens later. So those are the things that I have to coach them on. On the insurance side, the biggest thing I hear from GCDs is their board wanting to make sure they're covered. There's just been so much in the news you can turn on all the time. And if you're not familiar with the term jury nullification, that's really big in California. That's basically where, let's say someone comes in and they're seeking a certain amount based on an insurance claim, or they feel like they have been wronged by a board, and the jury will come back with a much higher settlement for this case than was ever anticipated. I'll give you an example of how that can happen in Round Rock. A couple of months ago, there was a city manager there, got crossways with the city on not meeting some of their demands, and as part of their contract, they had a payout of $412,000. Well, the city said, we're not going to pay you for that because we don't think you lived up to the standards of that. Took it to trial. The city manager won. So anticipating that they were going to get 412,000, they ended up getting 12.5 million. It shocked even the city manager. So
Wow.
those kind of cases make us think about that. With GCDs, I think overall your risk profile is a little bit lower, depending on what your employees are doing. I mean, if they're going out and inspecting sites and talking about permits and those kind of things, the risk is typically a little bit lower with that for GCDs. But like I said, the board thing is more than anything what people are asking about.
Great. And speaking of the board, that's actually my next question is, so you mentioned liability insurance. Does that include officer and director liability or coverage if a specific board member gets sued?
Yes, yes. We have coverage limits for that, but we will actively or have our attorneys that we have relationships with that will act as the attorney for the individual. Now, just keep in mind, if a board member has done something that is illegal,
Mhm.
we don't provide the coverage for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I think that makes sense.
it does.
And I don't think those are the situations that typically these people are being sued for. So,
Right.
um, and I think that is all we have. I'll just add one other note is that so tagged, we do a cybersecurity training video when that government requirement came into place. And I remember just first hearing about the risk management fund, I got excited hearing about the cyber consulting. It seems like just a perfect complement, that a tag member could do our training, which is very much geared towards the GCDs and the very small entities, and then do the risk management funds training, and then put some of those practices into place, and then do that cyber consulting to really just make sure your digital house is in order. Um, I think that seems like a really cool opportunity for anyone that's a member of the fund.
And people have commented, Julie, that even with sunset reviews and those kind of things, they're getting comments that they're uncomfortable with. The districts and authorities are uncomfortable with, and now they're gravitating back to us and
Yeah.
saying, okay, now I know I said before that we were just a 4-person shop, we're not big enough to need you, or we have the other end where entities are too large and say we already have staff. But this is it's no additional charge. It's part of your
Mhm.
membership.
Yeah, and that's great. I would not think that hackers would target a small GCD, but I did specifically speak to a single county district that has 2 employees. I don't think they have a ton of money they're hiding or anything, but they did get hacked for there was a ransom involved. It was a whole thing.
Yep.
So yeah, no one's really immune. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. I have not seen any hands come up. So that means you just did such a great job of
Ah,
sharing all the information.
thank you.
So everyone online, like I mentioned, we will be, this has been recorded and we'll share it on our YouTube channel and it'll go in the weekly updates. So we'll make sure that everyone has those links. If not tomorrow, then it would be early next week. Um, And if you have any questions, Timm's contact information is right here. And if you somehow lose all of this and need to be connected to Timm, feel free to shoot me an email. And with that, I think I'll just say thank you. Thank you so much, Timm, for coming and sharing this information with us today. I hope some of the GCDs online give you a call, learn more about their options, or if it's a current member, I think, you know, it's maybe a third, half of the people on that now they know more about what they can do. So thank you so much. And to everyone, have a great rest of your day. Hope y'all get some rain. And yeah, that's it. Goodbye.
Thank you, Julie.